Resuming debate, the honourable member for Yukon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm pleased to rise today in support of Bill C-10, the Safe Streets and Communities Act. I want to start, Madam Speaker, by talking about what the name of this bill actually means to Canadians. For a long time, Canadians have watched the criminal justice system work in a way that was not making the safety and security of our streets a community priority. After all, if it had been a priority, how could previous governments stand by while dangerous criminals were released from prison after serving a third or even a sixth of their sentences? In addition to all of this, Canadian victims, having already suffered so much, were not being listened to or included in the correction process of their offenders. This was not only worsening the feeling of victimization, but was also extremely insulting. Madam Speaker, these are just some of the reasons why our government is so serious about delivering the right kind of changes that are found here in the Safe Streets and Communities Act. It's important for the safety of law-abiding Canadian families, it's important for victims, and it's important because we need to have a justice system in this country that Canadian families can feel confidence in. Since first taking office, we have worked to restore confidence in Canada's justice system and to fulfill our commitment to put law-abiding Canadians and victims first. We have taken direct action to fulfill that commitment through this legislation and giving our law enforcement agencies the resources and tools they need to do their jobs effectively. We have also moved forward in many areas to crack down on crime and to ensure that our neighbourhoods and communities are safe and secure. Canadians have told us that they want a justice system that actually delivers justice and that protects our citizens without compromising the values that define our country. Again, Madam Speaker, I believe the legislation in front of us today does exactly that. It's yet another step forward in our commitment to keep Canadians safe. There are a number of measures contained in Bill C-10, some of which my honourable colleagues have spoken about quite eloquently today. Bill C-10 will help us build safer streets and communities by, for example, establishing new mandatory minimum penalties for certain existing offences related to child exploitation and increasing the maximum sentence to better reflect the reprehensible nature of these crimes. The legislation before us today will also provide mandatory minimum penalties for serious drug offences, when such offences are carried out for organized crime purposes or if they involve targeting our children. One case where we repeatedly see this, Madam Speaker, is with the targeting of school areas or areas around schools by drug dealers. I think that all of us can agree that there are few things worse than specifically targeting our children for criminal purposes. Deliberately trying to get kids hooked on drugs for financial gain is indeed deplorable, which is why I am pleased to support the measures in Bill C-10 that provide mandatory minimum sentences for those who engage in this sort of illegal activity. The Safe Streets and Communities Act also delivers real penalties for serious and repeat violent young offenders, Madam Speaker. Bill C-10 proposes amendments to the Youth Criminal Justice Act that would highlight the protection of society as a fundamental principle for the Youth Criminal Justice Act. It will simplify pretrial detention rules to help ensure that, when necessary, violent and repeat young offenders are kept off the streets while awaiting trial, and strengthen sentencing provisions and reduce barriers to custody where appropriate for violent and repeat young offenders. In terms of increasing offender accountability, Madam Speaker, Bill C-10 proposes very important reforms to the Correction and Conditional Release Act to modernize discipline in prisons and to add a requirement in law that each offender completes his or her own correctional plan. This would include such as behavioral expectations and the meeting of court-ordered obligations such as child support and victim restitution. Bill C-10, among other things, will also enshrine victim participation in parole board hearings and keep victims better informed about the behavior and handling of offenders. As well, Madam Speaker, the Safe Streets and Communities Act proposes amendments to the Criminal Records Act that would make certain people ineligible to apply for criminal record suspension. including those convicted of sexual offenses against children or those convicted of more than 3 offenses. I want to address this point specifically, Madam Speaker. What we are saying with this provision is that there are some people who should never be eligible for a criminal record suspension. As I said earlier, targeting our children is one of the most despicable forms of crime, and sexual abuse of a child is among the most heinous. By including these provisions in the Safe Streets and Communities Act, we are taking action to ensure that those who have committed this terrible crime will never be able to hide from the harm they have caused the most vulnerable in our society, our children. We believe this is an appropriate form and fair measure in face of such despicable crimes. New mandatory minimum penalties are provided for 7 existing offenses related to child sexual exploitation and abuse for children under 16 years of age, such as sexual assault with a weapon, aggravated sexual assault, incest, and luring a child through the use of a computer. The addition of mandatory minimum penalties to these offenses would also have the effect of limiting the use of conditional sentences or house arrest for these crimes. Madam Speaker, as a father, I am concerned about predators that hunt our children online and prey on their innocence. As a police officer, I have looked into the eyes of too many victims trying to provide comfort, unsure if they would find the justice and protection that they both needed and deserved. As a corrections manager, I have been part of the rehabilitative process, the programming, hope, help, and healing that can come from these institutions, as well as the human potential that lies within. As an investigator for the Safer Community and Neighborhoods Unit in my riding, I saw the degradation of neighborhoods, citizens' sense of safety, and pride. I heard the loud and resounding voice of our communities to take action, and I witnessed firsthand the revitalization of full neighborhoods, community spirit and pride, and citizens' sense of safety and security. I also watched Habitat for Humanity homes take the place of drug dens, and I watched the long but successful struggles of those battling with addictions finally rise above them. It was through action, bold and tough decisions, that the first, not the last step, in a better life for all for today occurred. Madam Speaker, our government has the courage and the resolve to learn from our past, improve our present, and perfect our future. In closing, I hope that my honourable colleagues on this side of the House will also demonstrate the courage and resolve needed to keep Canadian families safer, stand up for victims, hold criminals accountable by supporting this act. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments.